Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card-holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Archetypes, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, Bhatt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Quiver, Architect, and Cool Stuff Incorporated. Today, I have my very dear friend who I've known for like a decade something or whatever in the Magic Twitter sphere, member of the Pauper Freedom Panel, whatever they call it, the
Format Panel.
Yeah, there we go. I was like, there's an F in there. I'm like, it's not French fries, so we're going to go somewhere. Alex Ullman. He's also just like, I don't know, I've just known you for a billion years. You play Golgari, you play Pauper. You are like one of the key voices of Pauper out there alongside of like Emma and Paige and some of the other folks. But you've been talking about Pauper for literally as long as I've known you. So, hey, man, how's it going?
You know, it's going good. And you mentioned Golgari, like we were talking about cards I keep in my wallet. This is one of the cards I keep in my wallet. I have a couple of these just to hand out to random
Why?
people. Um,
That
you
card
know,
is not good.
it's not good. I love bad Golgari cards. Like that's my jam and commander. I think
Luckily for
right now I
you,
have
there's a lot of them.
so, but that's, not to go off on a tangent right away, but that's part of the fun of Commander for me is being able to like go through the cards and see, oh, this in this one very specific situation, this will do something really cool, and then I can either do it again or build something else with and forget about it for 10 years and then bring it back. Like that, I'm excited about because it's an insect now, and there are so many cards that care about insects.
Oh, right. Grist suddenly cares about the stupid Golgari charm or whatever the hell it was.
Yeah. Oh,
Lock it.
Golgari Charm's great though.
No, not that. I mean, Golgari, what is that
Oh,
stick? The
Kirun.
yeah, Kirun. I was like, it's the Dragon Maze one. So it's not Locket. It's not like Go Signet. It's the other one that I have just infinite of because there were like 40 of them in Dragon's Maze and they were in every slot.
I drafted that block a lot.
Look, 2 parts of that block were fantastic.
Yes. I hope we're talking about the same 2 parts.
Everybody's like, shoot, how do you dog on Dragon's Maze so much? It's got your favorite card. And I'm like, look, Tajik was there. You think Tajik was any good in the limited format? Absolutely not. Well, actually, no, that's not true. It was pretty good in the Boros deck, but you couldn't draft a Boros deck.
It has one of my favorite commanders that I've actually had a chance to build, which is Varl's. But I always get into things where people are like, oh, you should build Varl's Infect. And I'm like, no. I built Varl's Warriors just because it's a warrior, and I wanted to play Obsidian Battle Axe.
Yes.
So I was like, Varl's and Obsidian Battle Axe and the oh god, it's Raider Spoils from Cons of Tarkir, where like all your creatures get +1/+0, and if a warrior hits them, you can pay a life and draw a card. And all these random warriors with high power, low mana value. It was not a good deck. But I loved it, and I did something the other day where I'm like, oh, Harold, that card from Kaldheim,
Yes.
finds elves, Tyvar cards, or warriors.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm thinking about doing it again, and it's not going to be good.
But
it's
here's
not.
the thing, though. Since Najila's birth, there's been a lot of really good warriors that have been printed. There are a lot of really, really busted, especially, I mean, in black and green, Kaldheim helped a lot. Horizons helped a lot. Battle Bond helped because every card in Battle Bond was a warrior, right? So it was like really, really good. Because I know, like in Dragon's Maze, since we're talking about Dragon's Maze right now, like for instance, the commanders that were in there, they're really solid, fun. Like they're like good, clean magic. There's no shenanigans. I mean, okay, Mythics and maybe a little garbage, but they're all like just good, clean magic. They do what you want them to do. They're very by the book. It's very fair magic. There's no like yeah. I think that's the thing. That set was very fair, like very, very fair.
I
If you
think I
lose to
still
Chijik, you feel like you don't feel robbed. You feel like, "Okay, yeah, you know what? I saw that coming 38 turns ago, but by God, he earned it," you know?
I think I still have like my first real blue green deck in Commander that I stuck with for a while was a Voral of the Whole Clade Hydras
That card
deck.
is great.
Yeah, I still have a foil copy. I haven't played like I for a while I got off of +1/+1 counters as a theme because it's so finicky, so bookkeeping. I don't think I have a Cathar's Crusade in any deck right now. I used to, but just too much math. Although now I make tons of spider tokens with Ishkana, and so I just use those things to like denote how many spider tokens I have. But yeah, that there were some really sweet cards, and I think that's part of the fun. Is like, yeah, the set might have been bad or not as good as other sets, but it's fun to find like those cards that are just awesome. And I think part of the problem with Dragon's Maze is that it was kind of a gimmick. Like every card
Mm.
is gold. Not every card is gold, but like all 10 guilds. Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
thinking of.
the problem was they had a small set, and then they tried to jam 10 guilds worth of cards in there, and that's like an impossible task for anybody. Alexis did her best, but it's like that set is not that set had too many masters and too many demands on it, and not nearly the room it needed to be able to do what it wanted. If it was a full large set, you could have gotten away with it easy, but it didn't.
If it was a Horizons or a Master set, because they
Oh
had like
god.
Double Masters 2022, which was 10 3-color pairs, and it worked to an extent. But this was before that innovation, I
Yeah.
think.
So it's like Dragon's Maid suffered a lot. I mean, the reputation comes from the fact that it was not good and limited, and it had like one constructed card, right? Like the only people anybody cared about was Voice of Resurgence, and that set was. But it's like Kamigawa, right? Like once the commander player discover it, you see that there's actual like meat on that bone, but it's not a ton. It's still in my bottom tier of sets. I think if I was gonna
Mhm.
go and like rate things, but it's I don't know. I'll figure it out when I have to do it on Shivam and Wheeler, and then we can see where we
God.
go with that stupid set.
There are definitely two enchantments in that set that like probably should see way more play than they do, but they're expensive. Like one is like I think it's called Gruel War Chant, which is like I think it's 2 red green. It gives your creatures a power boost, and I want to say menace.
Yes,
And
yes. It's like the Orcish Oriflame, but like
yeah, yeah. Oh, we're going. No, it costs 4, not 3. Um, or what was the misprint on Orphelme? Was it 2 back in revised?
yes, it was one in a red.
Yeah, yeah.
Theoretically, one in a red.
Theoretically.
Mm.
For those who don't know, they did a lot of misprints in revised,
Dude,
and
the
that
original
one.
sets are just so full of like I don't know how this happened level of misprint. Like, how do you just green Serendip? How do you green Serendip? Where does that
Oh
even
my
come
god,
from?
I that was one of those things that made me just. It was definitely a thing that made me love Magic. Is wait, is this card blue? Is it green?
Yeah, right.
And playing on the playground, you had people who would play it in their green deck. No, no, the board was green. Or people who would, and I don't think I ever saw anyone when I was like 10 years old playing it in a blue deck because the border was
It
green.
was in my blue white deck because it was just I was like, "There's an island in the corner. I don't care what color it is." Of course, somebody later showed me the real one. I'm like, "No, no, no, you don't understand. The real Serendib is green. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care that it's got if a each face on it. It's still green."
Mm.
Um, God, I love that card.
And the
Yeah.
other enchantment I think was Gleam of Battle, which is like this horrendously like 4 red white in Boros enchantment. But when you attack, I think it puts a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control, which
Wow,
is
you nailed it, man. 4 red white enchantment when a creature you control attacks, put a 1/1 counter on. How have I never seen this card? That's a house.
so
It's
I actually have
really expensive though.
6 mana, whatever.
Yeah.
It, so I have a story somewhat related to this. Is I for a little while I did official coverage for a Grand Prix, and my first Grand Prix ever with Wizards was the one where Reed Duke narrated his own
Oh my god.
matches. Like,
Grand Prix Reedmond was, like, literally my favorite Reed Duke I mean, my Reed Duke, my favorite GP of all time.
so you have to like imagine me, like someone who's trying to been getting on coverage forever, someone who grew up going to BDM's game store. Like I literally have known BDM for since I was a literal small child, as opposed to now an adult small child, and working with him and everything. And like one day we're out at dinner and we're just rattling off Enchant World. and it's going around, and it comes down to you can't just
I like that
name.
the way I like that the basis of this conversation is, so we're just drinking and rattling off enchant worlds. Because
There
like,
might
you're
have
just
been.
like, "Oh, yeah, Concordant Crossroads."
It came down to two of us, and it was me and Reed. And Reed beat me soundly. He like I ran out of enchant worlds to name, and he went on for like three or four more. So, and I think we got to almost all of them.
Cookson Falls, because like, there were
Oh
2 enchant worlds that were in Homelands.
yeah, and
There's
there were
like
some
2 or
in
3.
Mirage.
I'm not doing this. This is a podcast. We are not gonna sit
We
and
are
recite
not. No, you
enchant
can
worlds.
do the
But the
Mirage
point
enchant worlds with
really
Shivam and Wheeler Love Magic.
Yeah, exactly, seriously. Um, I like enchant worlds actually a lot as a just as an overall
Oh yeah,
card type, because all of them are cool.
yeah.
They always are fun.
Love
My
Tombstone Stairwell.
Yeah, oh god, I love that card. So is that an enchant world?
It is an enchant world.
Oh my
It
god, I love
is
that card so
gross.
much.
It is
But
gross, and there are zombies that do death triggers.
yeah, dude, that's why it's in my zombies deck. It's gross. It
Exactly,
does
it's
nutty
gross.
butter it does nutter butter things, and it's so powerful. People don't ever use it because it's from a million years ago and it's expensive, and they're like, "But it gives my opponent zombies." I'm like, "But it gives you more zombies, so let's chill." But one of the actually, before we get off the topic of Dragon's Maze, one of the best Golgari cards in there is Deadbridge Chant.
Yes. Oh my god, I
Deadbridge
love
Chant is
that
a card
card.
that I like, look at a lot, and I'm like, "Why have I not been playing this card in, like, my Nethroi deck or whatever?" 4 green, black for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you put the top 10 cards of your library into the graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose a card at random in your graveyard. If it's a creature, put it onto the battlefield, or otherwise put it into your hand. So it's just like, it's hella good. It fills your
Oh
yard
yeah.
and then it brings them back. It's just like, I can't believe I haven't been putting this in, like, my Reanimator deck.
Mhm.
What have I been
It,
doing?
it's it's one of those things that I think, and I've played that card a lot, and what I have found is that you need to have the right mindset and group, because I've really bounced back and forth between, you know, that really kind of let's all hang out with friends, be a little more, social about this experience, let everyone do their thing a little bit, and then someone's going to end the game. I've played at that end, and then I've also played at the not CEDH level, but I am here with my Omnath deck, and my Omnath deck is here to just do the same
Eat
thing
you.
every game. And
Yes.
I played that one much more recently at my LGS, or what was my LGS, and now I'm definitely trending more towards that middle ground, which is what I like. I like being able to do some silly things. I like being able to play my six drops or play them on turn four because it's
I think
commander.
I've come around to the idea that every commander player should have, or at least within your budgetary means or your ability to, everybody should have a beginning of the day deck and an end of the day deck. As in,
Hmm.
like, hey, we're here to just chill, we're here to just rumble, we're here to go to the red zone or just dirtle around or whatever. And then, hey, we got to go home in like an hour. So now let's just, put the spikes on our fists and start just laying it out, right?
Hmm.
It's good to just have like, it's important to just be able to cover any kind of table. Like, look, we all know what my preferences are. We know where my love lies, at the slower side of things and at the build a big, intricate machine level of crap. But also, sometimes you just want to go slug other people in the face. And it's just like, it's okay to just have a deck or two that just haymakers and like it does a thing, and the thing is break your face, right? Like, it's fine. It's fine.
Oh yeah.
But let's talk actually, since you segued me a smidge, let's go back a step. You've been doing like coverage and writing about magic for a long time. How did that
Oh
start?
my god. Yeah. So I went to college in Central New York at a place called Binghamton University. It's one of the larger public schools in New York, and funny enough, I had such a great time there. I ended up working at colleges, but when I got there, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a physics major or an English major, and I
Hmm.
took calculus
Because
my
those are the
first
same.
semester. It's what I was really interested in at the time, as like a 17, 18-year-old in high school. And I took
Hmm.
one class in calculus. I was like, I am not going to do this for 4 years of my life. I had a lot more fun in English. I like reading. I grew up being a voracious reader. My dad also was a voracious reader and would had an entire library of pulp novels in our basement, just boxes upon boxes of books he would pick up at the used bookstore. And I got introduced to all sorts of just that era of fantasy, like all of the Amber Chronicles, I got introduced to Doctor Strange through my dad. Had this like little paperback that maybe was the
Sure.
size of a large index card with like full Steve Ditko art, and it made no sense, and I loved it. And I got really into some fantasy series. Some of them didn't age as well, but one like Redwall, that entire thing.
Oh god, Redwall is
Um,
so good.
yeah. And like I was in a group of really, friends of mine who we all read a ton and a lot of science fiction and a lot of fantasy. And so at college, I really fell in love with reading and writing. Took the same professor 3 times for science fiction, horror fiction. I was supposed to take a class on Beowulf, like just on Beowulf with them, and then unfortunately they had an accident, had to leave for health reasons. But I got into Pauper at around the same time. Like I mentioned earlier, I had grown up going to Neutral Ground, New York, and
Mm,
would play in PTQs and was known there. I was like a little kid that got known there. Became friendly with Brian David Marshall, who also knows my dad because my dad would come to pick me up from Friday Night Magic and sit in the corner reading a book,
mm.
browsing the books they had there, and would play PTQs. Never really did well. I was there to have a fun time, not a winning time.
Sure,
But
but I mean, back in the day, it was less about like the. I mean, yeah, the tournament's there, but it's more about you're hanging out with your buddies on Friday night, right? Like,
oh
it's
yeah,
F and M.
yeah, it was great. But I still felt very competitive. And when I was going to college is when Magic Online came out. Like
Mm,
I had just gotten a computer of my own, and I was playing Magic Online. And I had a job at college, but it was a college job. I wanted to be on a budget. And I remember reading this article. I don't remember. I think it was by an author who was writing for the main website at the time. I think it was Jay Moldenhaller Salazar,
yes.
and they focused on Magic Online. And there was an article about PDC, which was the Pauper Deck Challenge. And the story behind the format is there was someone who was on a very strict budget. They were caring for an ailing family member
Hmm.
and really worked with some people to craft this thing where it was completely player run on Magic Online. And
Popper was initially a Magic Online only format, wasn't it?
so there's some apocrypha around that. Some
Mm,
people would run commons only events.
mm,
But the Pauper we know today that kind of has evolved into what we work on with the Pauper Format Panel really got its start on Magic Online in
mm,
the PDC.
mm.
And they would run 16-week seasons. I think I joined at the start of season 3. And it was a chance for me to kind of be competitive without having to spend a ton of money.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember I put together a deck, and it was just a slide deck. It was just a red deck on a curve with no creature type matter synergies. There was Sparksmith in there because Sparksmith's a broken magic card when you're playing with
Sure
commons.
was.
And I won. I just ran the table, and that deck put me on the map. And I started writing forum posts. And then eventually, some people started a website just for the format, and I would write forum posts there and write articles there. And eventually, the person I was dating, I think my senior year, is like, "You do this a lot. Why don't you write? Like, you write all these papers, you write all this stuff." And so I think it was either 2005 or 2006, back
Wow.
when Star City Games still allowed people just to randomly submit. I I submitted an article, and I don't know if it's still out there, but I wrote an article for Star City Games back then. The Ferret was my first editor ever.
Yeah, the ferret, man, what a writer that
Mhm.
guy was.
It's still like his novels are great. I have greatly enjoyed them. Um, and he also has one of my favorite quotes about multiplayer magic, which I am going to go on this tangent on, which is like trying to find a good multiplayer play group is like trying to form a ska band. And as someone who listens to a ton of ska music to this day, that quote has always resonated with me. Um,
That is a very niche joke, but those of us who appreciate it.
yeah,
Um,
I hope some of you out there have picked it up. Anyway, um, thank you.
I
Um,
see what you did there.
So I wrote that article, and then I kind of went back to writing for the Pauper websites, and I went to grad school. And an unfortunate thing happened on my way to grad school. I shipped most of my cards, and one box fell off the truck. And it was the box with my cards and my music, like my CD collection. So just it got lost in shipping, and it
Sure it
never.
did.
I out of all the boxes that to, I don't know. It wasn't my rare binder. That one made it. So I really kind of, and I didn't have a great time my first semester of grad school. I didn't match well with my placement.
Sure.
Was really struggling being so far away from home. Um, but I started playing more Pauper and spent a lot of time doing that. Again, this is still when it's a player run format. And I got connected to puremtgo.com, which is
Mm,
still running today. And I remember the editor was Josh Clater, who's someone I recognize from consuming a ton of Magic content in my youth. He was a PTQ grinder from, the Mid Atlantic, Midwest region. I think he's still in Kentucky. Someone I consider a friend to this day, and like we'll still talk to about content. And I started writing for them, and I wrote, like, I kept myself on a weekly schedule, and I started writing. I think that must have been 2007, 2008. And I've more or less been writing Pauper content on an almost weekly basis ever since. I've written for them. I've written for what is now Cool Stuff Inc. Back when it was Gathering Magic. I've
mm.
written for Star City Games. I wrote there for a couple years, and now I write for Channel Fireball. And my own site. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. It's just because I
Yeah,
wrote.
because like I mean, because I read your stuff before I knew who you were, because obviously I read all Magic content, and I was just a voracious reader, even formats I didn't play, and I was always interested in reading people who were like very devoted to the idea of any specific format, because I believe that like people always get on me like, man, do you consume more? Do you like watch all these other commanders? I'm like, I don't watch any commander content. I don't need people to tell me about commander. I am set. But what I do read is I read like everything else. I read like Flores talking about pre-modern, or you about Pauper, or about Pioneer, or whatever it is, because I believe that from other formats of Magic we can learn things and bring them back to our own. I don't need
Exactly.
somebody to tell me what's good in commander. I'm the authority on that, right? Like, as weird as that is, but it's like, it's more that this way I can learn what's working elsewhere and see what's interesting and see what ways I can change and evolve my game. And so I love reading stuff from formats I don't play, because it's like that's why I'm sad that the mothership has gone away from like doing so many articles, because I used to love reading like standard like roundups, or like here's what's happening in vintage, or whatever the hell. Like, I'm never going to play that format, but at least I can see like, oh, these two cards synergize in a cool way, maybe I could do something. Now, like Pauper for me is because the prof one day was like, you need to play Pauper, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And he gave me an elves deck, and I was like, this is just like my modern elves deck. And he's like, no, it's not. And it turns out my Pauper elves deck could trash my modern elves deck. And I realized later on that I'm like, Pauper elves, like any elves deck can hold its own against any other elves deck, but Pauper is just nutter butters, because you're using like Well Wisher, and you're like, oh, my life is 350 or whatever. And you're like, oh, damn.
Yeah. Hopper is this really interesting sandbox where you get to play with mistakes, but the mistakes are kind of over time have gone into balance with each other. I mean, well, you have things like, and I love the Monarch for multiplayer. I think it's a really good multiplayer mechanic. I think it enables action as opposed to enabling
Yeah,
defense.
Monarch, it disincentivizes turtling, and it
Yeah.
encourages you to sit and just plink at each other, and it's really important. Like, it's like goad light, it's like it
Mhm.
gives you goad incentive without forcing people.
But what you just described, turtling up, is exactly how it's enacted in a two-player format.
Oh yeah.
Because the advantage is I get two cards a turn, you get one card a turn, as opposed to a game of, like, let's say Commander at the start, where it's I get two cards a turn, you all get at least three cards a turn and are incentivized to take it from me, so you start getting more cards. And similarly with the initiative. The initiative I actually underrated at first, because I'm like, oh, these effects aren't in the Undercity, aren't necessarily worth a
Oh my
full
god,
card.
dude, the
But
initiative
I
is
was so
stupid.
wrong. It is.
Especially in a two-player format. Well, that's the thing that I think, like, I think
Mhm,
people didn't realize what would happen if you take something like the Initiative or Monarch and put them from a multiplayer free-for-all where there's a lot of give and take and throw it
mhm.
into a one-on-one format where I can just sit and build, like, the world's greatest control deck and then just throw down and start, like, leveling up the initiative every turn or leveling up my or just getting value from Monarch every turn.
So that's actually one of the interesting things is that before and we moved the format panel moved pretty quickly on initiative when the people were going like Dark Ritual, Lotus Petal, Cabal Ritual, turn one initiative. We
Yeah.
moved we moved pretty quickly off of that. And we moved it out of blue and black. And so right now there are three initiative cards legal in the format. There's the artifact, there's the green one, and the white one. And what we have found is whereas Monarch promotes turtling up and likes
Mm.
UCC cards like cheap removal, prismatic strands, things like that. The decks that make the best use out of initiative are more mid-range decks. You know, you have a black-white blink deck, an ephemerate deck that runs Goliath Paladin. And that one, like, yes, it does turtle up to a sense, but it turtles up
Also,
with
for the purpose
creatures.
of the people at home, please, tell me what the cards you mentioned are.
Of course. So Goliath Paladin is four and a white for I believe a giant soldier. That's a 3/6 vigilance that you lets you take the initiative. And the initiative is the dungeon from Battle for Baldur's Gate that has a lot of steps, but the and mostly in Pauper, what it does is that it lets you search a basic from your library to your hand, and
Mhm.
then in well, I've used all modes, but basically you can either go an aggressive route, which is two +1/+1 counters. Target
Yeah.
player loses 5 life. I
Draw a
think
card
the draw card is the next one, and
and then
then
Throne
get
of
to
the
flip
Dead
the
3.
top 10 and get a creature with hexproof and two plus one. Is it two or three plus one
3
plus
plus
one
1 plus
counters?
1 counters.
The other route is a more controlling route where you get to start in the same thing: search a land, scry two, make a gold, make a 4/1 with menace, and then Throne of the Dead 3. And then
And
there's a
in the center, there's
cross.
also the little go target creature, but nobody's ever used that.
Oh, I have because
I mean, I
sometimes
guess sometimes.
I'll start on the control path and want to draw the card, and I'll
Oh,
go to
fair,
my
fair,
own and I'll go to my own creature that was going to attack anyway.
fair.
Um, so and then ephemerate is one white for an instant with rebound. So you cast it, you blink something, and then you get to do it again on your upkeep, which is just such a powerful card in a format
That
based on
card,
the
when that
battlefield
stupid card
abilities.
came out, I okay, so I will be a soapbox for a second. I hate blink strategies in Pauper specifically. Blink in Pauper and Mnemonic Wall and Ephemerate and that whole thing is just
Mhm.
a garbagey garbage deck run by garbagey garbage people. I hate everything about it. Um, Ephemerate though, like when that card showed up in Modern Horizons 2, whatever it was, I know my eyes widened. You guys must have
Mhm.
been like, "What the hell is that?"
So here's so about blink decks or things like that. They are really integral to the format. Like they are something like the Archaeomancer, which is two blue blue. When it enters the battlefield, lets you rebuy an instant or sorcery. Same with Mnemonic Wall, which is four and a blue. Mnemonic Wall has a May trigger, which makes it a lot harder to parse on Magic Online.
Mm,
But um, they are integral to the format because the format doesn't have a lot of huge haymakers that you might see in other formats. It has more now with things like the Monarch and Initiative and others. But the problem with Blink strategies is that when you look at the strategy I'm talking about before, the white black one, where your top end is blinking Goliath Paladin or Vampire Sovereign, which is a three black black for a 3/4 flying that when it enters the battlefield, you drain them for three
yes.
or any number of cantrip creatures, spirited companion, 1/1 for draw a card for one and a white, or the one from New Capenna, inspiring overseer, which is two and a white, 2/1 flying. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and gain a life. The blue versions of these decks create a lock state, a prison state, and that's what they are. They're basically prison decks where you will take no more meaningful game actions. The two most popular historically, one is fueled by the Urzatron, and that one traditionally has ended with Mnemonic Wall. Um, and the reason that this is so powerful is in the past you'd have to have Ghostly Flicker, which is two and a blue
Yes.
for an instant, exile two creatures, lands, or artifacts, or and return to the
Yeah.
battlefield, or some combination of therein. and you could have two walls and a ghostly flicker, and each one would get you both walls and a new spell. Ephemerate is that in a box. You don't you bounce it, you flicker the wall or the Archaeomancer, and you get back the spell. And then on your upkeep, you get back the ephemerate after it resolves. And in Tron, that's mostly used to either just repeatedly buy back a lightning bolt to burn your face off, or Dinner Over Horror, your favorite magic card, which is four blue black for a 4/4 horror. Originally from Gatecrash, it was downshift in one of the modern master sets. And when
It
it
was
enters the
in
battlefield,
MM 2015.
yes. And when it enters the battlefield, it casts recoil. Basically, return target permanent, not land, not non-land permanent, permanent to its owner's hand. That player discards a card.
It is
And
the
so
worst card in Magic. I hate it so much.
I hate Stonehorn Dignitary more.
Stonehorn Dignitaries, like, isn't that the one like skip your next attack
Next
phase
to,
or something?
but they stack. So if someone flickers it 3 or 4 times, you lose 3 or 4 attacks. And the other popular version is one that's much better today, at least in competitive Pauper, which is Azorius Familiars, which instead of using Tron, uses Sunscape Familiar from Plane Chase, not Plane Chase, Planescape, Planar Chaos. Wait,
Plain.
Plane Shift,
You get
the
there. You'll get there.
which is 1 and a white for an 0/3 wall, but it reduces the cost of your blue and green spells by one generic. And so it does the same kind of flicker loops, but it also runs Mole Drifter, which is gross with Ephemerate. It runs things like Snap, which is one in a blue, return target creature to its owner's hand, untap 2 lands. And when you're running things like Azorius Chancery, and it costs 1 blue, you're netting mana. And that deck doesn't have to be a prison deck the same way, but it can also run Stonehorn Dignitary, it also can run Sage's Row Denizen, which is 2 and a blue from Gatecrash, one of the good
Yep.
ones from that block. And whenever a blue creature enters the battlefield, target player mills 2 cards, or target opponent mills 2 cards.
Almost
So
all of
you,
the blank road denizens are just such good, powerful cards. Like, I think
uh,
that people deeply underestimate how strong some of them are.
yeah, I think I don't know what the white one does, but I think
It just
it's
taps a target creature opponent controls. The red one gives it
I
itself +1/+0.
mhm.
Black
Black one
gives
gives menace, build
intimidate,
intimidate. Yeah.
and then green gives a 1/1 counter on target creature.
Oh no, the green wins the game because you just run it in persist combo.
Oh yeah, it's hella good in EDH, let alone in Pomper.
I
But
think I
so
have it in an EDH deck.
yeah, like it's funny because like we were talking about Golgari EDH earlier and fiddly things. My Golgari deck is -1/-1 counters all day long, so I'm all about
Mhm.
just spilling the dice onto the table. Um, but the thing is like because one of the things about Pauper that always got me is that you can go on to Magic Online, and Magic Online's currency of choice is tickets. One ticket is
Mhm.
roughly $1 if you buy it from the store. But you can go to like bots and stuff and buy like commons and things for fractions of a ticket. So literally for $1 or the equivalent thereof, you can buy almost a full Pauper deck of just like perfectly reasonable Pauper
Mhm.
staples or whatever because they're all commons and and Midgo they've got like infinite of them. So there's not like a it's much easier especially now and like somehow in paper there's a lot of Pauper staples that are ridiculously expensive for some reason. um
There are some online too. Like the ones that are most expensive right now are the ones from Baldur's Gate because that didn't get a full digital release yet. It's being released
Fair.
in prize packs. But Snuff
Hmm.
Out, which is 3 and a black for an instant, where if you control a swamp, you can
Snuff
pay for a
out.
life to destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. Um, and that one's pretty pricey. Lotus Petal because it has such application outside
It's
of
weird.
Pauper.
Like it feels like Snuff Out has been around. It's like Snuff Out's been around since friggin' Mercadian Masks, and yet suddenly out of nowhere, it's become like one of the most widely used and widely sought after removal spells. And
I think at least in Pauper, it's because we just recently, like 2 years ago, or I guess it was the start of 2022, got dual lands with basic land types.
hmm.
Because until Kaldheim, there were no dual lands in Pauper with basic land types. So now you could run your blue black Delver deck
Oh, of course.
with Snuff Out, and you didn't have to give
Yeah,
up
because
casting
Snuff
time
Out
per
says if you
spell.
control a swamp, you can pay 4 life rather than pay the spell's Monocast, and if
Mhm.
you've got all of those Kaldheim duels or the Dominaria duels or whatever, you can just get this for free, and I guess that's also why it shows up so much in CDH is because it's literally just a free removal spell.
Mhm. It's a good spell, and it's one of those weird ones because right now Pauper's dealing with a lot of red with Monastery Swift Spear, which is one
Mm,
two red haste prowess, and there have been a push to make red uh, give it more access to card flow. So you have Experimental Synthesizer, the red Preordain,
yeah.
which is an artifact which lets you exile the
The
top
egg,
card played until end of turn.
and you get an Incidental Samurai.
Mhm.
Yeah,
No
card's
one,
great.
and then you have Reckless Impulse and Rin Resolve, which are the same card. They're just palette swapped, and they're one in a red for a sorcery. Exile the top two cards of your library. You can play them until your next turn.
I think
And so
changing that text to be until your next turn or until the end of your next turn or whatever is so good.
I think so too. I just wish it was consistent because some are play, some are cast, some are
Oh,
this
yeah,
turn,
and then it's
some
like,
are
"Oh, you can
next
use your
turn.
land, you can't." Yeah, I know. I feel like they're still trying to figure out what text they wanna land on, and so they're just scattershotting it.
I feel like it might have been a recent Good Morning Magic with your friend and mine, Gavin, where they talked about why they have to make certain choices. And I think part of it is in formats of our choice, which are non-rotating. We have to deal with all of them. We
Yep.
have to deal with going back to Outpost Siege, one of my favorite enchantments of
Love
all
me an
time.
Outpost Siege.
I have sadly had to cut it from my mono red deck because Visions of Phyrexia is just better.
We can
I
talk
know.
about that, but, yeah, go ahead.
So red is kind of the most popular deck right now because it's very consistent, very good, very low to the ground, very fast. And so the main way Pauper is played on Magic Online is this thing called a league, which is a 5 round non-Swiss event where you just play 5 rounds on your own time.
Yeah.
And if you want to, get the most out of it, you play a fast deck. Um, and so that's what you end up doing. You just kind of play it through and through. And because there are some people who really like to grind leagues for various reasons, that deck has just, you'll see it on Twitter, someone posting, I just ran into this deck 5 times in a row. What is going on? And meanwhile, I will like go 2 leagues without playing red once. And like it's anecdata, which is helpful because it does show us what that player experience is that is not shown by the actual raw numbers. Like red might be the most popular deck and it might not be winning a ton, but
Hmm.
if people hate losing to red so much that they're like taking time out of their day to talk about it, that's informative in a very different way.
Well,
And
because
granted,
it's
some
it's it's
people just get upset on
yeah.
Twitter because that's what they use it for.
Well, sure, but I mean, the thing is, like, it's not just that it's like not winning or whether it's strong or not, because that's one axis, that's one data point. But the relevant thing is the opponent having fun playing against its deck? Is this a challenge that they're enjoying trying to overcome? And sometimes the answer is no. It doesn't matter if it's not
Mhm.
winning. It doesn't matter if you can shellac the deck or not. If everybody comes back, it's like, man, that sucked to play against. That's a problem, right? Like,
Mhm.
but people get really irritated when you're like, "Oh, yeah, you know what? We should ban XYZ card because it's causing bad player experience." And they're like, "Well, it's good for me." I'm like, "Okay, but my inbox is full of people who are very unhappy about this, and also we're longtime players. We can see that it's fun for the person playing it, but it is
Mhm.
not fun for the persons playing against it, i.e., Paradox Engine, or like any other number of cards that are just like, hey, this card is more or less fine. However, the experience that it's causing for the other players is not worth the negative ramifications of having this card be legal, you know?"
I mean, for me, there are tons of cards I personally do not like playing against. Like an example I give, like my most hated commander card, the card I hate playing against the most, is Mind's Dilation. I hate playing against it. There's nothing rational about it.
No,
Nothing.
it's a 10
It's
mana card, man. It's like,
it's a 7 mana enchantment where
yeah,
they're not even guaranteed to get value. Still hate it.
it's a good story, but it's like
Oh, yeah.
yeah, sure, but I can see hating that. Like, I mean, I hate Torment to Hailfire, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're or like BDM, his You mention the word Bojuka Bog in his face and he'll throw a drink at you, you know? It's like
So I once played against him in Commander years ago with a just a Silas Wren unpartnered deck,
mm.
and I cast the same nil spell bomb against him 3 times, and he did not like that at all. This was after this was this was after I had played out a Bachuka Bog, so he
Oh
was
god, dude.
very
You're
unhappy with
lucky he talked to you again.
he we talk pretty regularly. We're both fans of the Mets. We go to games occasionally. He is someone that has had a huge positive influence on my life, and I will never let him forget that.
Yeah, but dude,
Oh
bogging
no,
that
I
guy
ruined his
4
day. I
times.
ruined his day.
Oh yeah, you probably like he probably went home and was just like grumbling bitterly to his wife. He's like, that Rassafras, and Alex is just like sitting there and I'm sure the Brooklyn is coming straight out, he's just like
Oh, I can give it back. I am from Brooklyn, and my accent is only thick when I say LaGuardia Airport.
Oh
That's the only
Jesus.
time I cannot pronounce that word as it is written. I can only say LaGuardia.
Yeah,
Um,
there's letters in there and they don't not relevant.
there's an R
Okay,
in there, I swear.
so let's talk about the Pauper panel.
Yeah.
Um, so how did Gavin approach you for this?
Um,
Okay,
I
actually, for the kids at home who didn't listen to my podcast with Emma or with Paige or whatever, the Pauper Freedom Panel is basically, I'm just going to be calling that for now on, the Pauper
It's
Format
okay.
Panel, the PFP, um, is basically the equivalent of the CAG, which is an advisory group made of Pauper notorieties and names and
Mhm.
people from around the world who play a lot of Pauper to go and talk to staff at Wizards about banning decisions or card designs or whatever it is. What does a format need, et cetera, et cetera. They do good work. I like them. They're also all my friends, so I'm deeply biased in this favor, and it's not my format, so they're not ruining it for me anyways. Um, yeah. So how'd you get on there?
So I've been talking with wizards in some capacity about Pauper for years. Like
Mm,
I would way back in 2009, I was selected to be on the first Community Cup ever because of
mm,
the work I had done with the Pauper format. And when they sanctioned Pauper and Magic Online, we talked about it back then because they had made some changes. The original ban list was they restricted each of the artifact lands, and that was it. But that they were using an old PDC ban list, and so we had actually unrestricted those lands, and it just banned cranial plating. So they made that change. Um, and so I have emails with Mike Turian, with Worth Wolpert, all these people who have been heavily involved in Magic Online and Pauper
mm,
for going back years and years and years. Like I would email with Lee Sharp over the time,
yeah.
Ali Medwin, and so and because I had written so much, and this is something I will talk about no matter what. If you're trying to get into content and trying to kind of um, network, or I hate that term, but if you're trying to like figure out what you can do differently to get yourself out there, is to be kind
Hmm.
and you never know who is going to be the person that's going to help you out the next day or
The industry is infinitesimally small.
Mhm.
Everybody who is a content creator or a person who is in charge of making cards or whatever it is, we are all like, there's like maybe a couple hundred of us tops. We all know each other. We all talk a lot. And you never know who is going to be your boss, your colleague, or your coworker, or somebody who can give you a hookup later on.
And so I would write these really like well thought out things where I would talk about what I'm perceiving, what other people are perceiving, and what I think should happen, and really try to be and it's hard to be as dispassionate as possible. And it is really hard to be dispassionate about something you care about. That is one
Oh,
of the
yeah.
hardest things in the world to do. And so like if if everyone came to me tomorrow and said, Alex, we have to ban tortured existence from Pauper. And for those of you who don't know, tortured existence is a single black for an enchantment from Stronghold, where you can play a black, discard a creature card from your hand to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand.
Hmm.
It's just moving game pieces. It's one of my favorite cards of all time. I love that card, an unreasonable amount. And I'd be upset. And if I would look at what they would lay out and I'd be like, if that's the right call, that's the right call. Um, because I work with people I trust on the format panel.
Mm,
But going back to what I was saying is that that's how I kind of got in. Like I before I was on the format panel, I did coverage at Grand Prix Reed Duke, and at that event, I got some of Gavin's time, and we talked about the format. We talked about what we thought it needed, where things could go, and I was honest about what I thought it needed, what I didn't like, what I did like, and over the years, I've built up that reputation.
Yeah.
And so right before the panel was officially formed, I got a note from Gavin, I think on Twitter. I don't know if he, or it might have been some other method of communication. He might have sent a carrier pigeon or something of that note.
Morse
Um,
code.
carrier pigeon, that white card from Alliances. A lot older than I look, folks. Um, I got a note and I set up a call with him. I think he was in Italy. He was on vacation somewhere because this was before the pandemic when Gavin was, jet setting Gavin. And he's like, so listen, this is what we need to do. We're trying to form this community of people that will help to advise Pauper. And your name is at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Um, but can you do it? And I said, listen, I needed some time to think about it. I, I kind of knew I was going to do it, but I wanted to talk to my spouse. I wanted to make sure that it was okay because we have he's 5 now, but this would have been when he was 2.5, like not even 2 is when it started. No, this started after the pandemic.
Hmm.
I don't remember when this started. Anyway, it started, and I guess it was last year. And I wanted to make sure I'd have the time. He was probably close to 4 at the time. And I wrote back and like, what's the expectation, all that. And I signed up very quickly. But I had been very vocal prior to that as to why I thought a panel of players would be a bad idea. Um, and and I'm not going to say like there are people who are like it's that same thing. It's very hard to be dispassionate about what you care about. And I think one thing that the CAG does well is that they have a large number of voices. You
Mm.
know, and not only a large number of voices, but a diverse number of voices.
Mm.
You and Rebel are vastly different people, vastly different players, but you both play Commander. And I think that's really helpful. And I think the composition of the panel really assuaged a lot of my fears about that. And being able to do the work, you know, it's really good to see people being able to set aside their own personal feelings
Oh yeah.
in the effort to make the best possible format.
That's one of the things that I wish people would understand better about these formats, about these panels that you and I are a part of, is that one of the reasons we're on these things is not necessarily because we represent a viewpoint, which is true. We're there partly because we do represent specific different viewpoints of whatever the format we're in charge of is. But more than that, it's the fact that we are all also capable of setting aside that viewpoint to be able to work for the betterment of the format. Which means that if a certain play style or something is going to be effective, it's our personal preference of a play style is going to be affected. However, it would make the format immeasurably better if this was not part of the format. Then
Mhm.
yeah, we're able to sit there and say, like, look, if we want Commander or we want Pauper to thrive, this has to go, so it does. Right? Like, I mean, there's so many cards I like my Timmy Hart really would love to see, but I just know that like primetime is not a good idea. It's really not.
Oh, sweet though.
Oh god, it's one of my favorite cards of all time. Are you kidding me? I would play the hell out of it if I could.
I mean, my thing is like I love black based mid range decks. I've put a lot of work into what's mono black control, which is like removal and card advantage creatures, um, all this kind of stuff. I love that. Like Phyrexian Rager, Chittering Rats, deck I've played for years and years. That deck is bad right now. It's not super viable. And every so often the idea of unbans come up, and everyone's like, you should unban him to make black good. I'm like, I would love him to Turok, black,
Oh my
target player
god, are you
discards 2 cards
kidding
at
me?
random. I would love playing that card. That card is a miserable play experience and should be allowed nowhere near Pauper Magic, especially in a format without days, which has been banned. And I know this is something else that's going to get me in a little bit of hot water. But one thing that I think has done, and I've said this very publicly, I think the fact that Pauper gets sometimes tagged as legacy like or legacy light,
Mm-hmm.
has been a net detriment to discussions around the format as its own entity.
Mm.
Because when you hear the words legacy, you think about certain cards and certain styles of play. And, there are these incredible restrictor plates on the format that kind of,
Sure.
stop some of the nonsense. Things like Force of Will, Wasteland, Thoughtseize, Chalice of the Void.
Mm.
None of these are fun cards to play against necessarily, but they all do a good job of helping to create an environment with these limiting factors. Pauper doesn't have those same set of limiting factors. There is no
Mm.
force of will. There's foil, which is 2 blue counter target spell, but you can pitch an island and a blue card as an alternate casting cost. Um, it doesn't have Thoughtseize. Its best discard spell is Duress.
Mm-hmm.
The best counter spell is Spellstutter Sprite, 1 in a blue, flash, 1/1 flying fairy,
I
and
hate that
counters
card.
target spell with mana value less than the number of fairies you control.
I'm surprised people don't play Arcane Denial. I guess you don't want
Uh,
them to
some
draw cards.
some people do actually. It's very popular in the fog decks. There's an entire strategy of blue green fog decks, which is Weather the Storm. Storm
Mm.
gain 3 life for 1 in a green.
The
Great
one
card.
safe storm spell.
Are you not a fan of Astral Steel? Tell me. Um, it's a bad Zoolander joke somewhere in there that I'm too tired to make. Um, but um, there's Duress. There's no Thoughtseize.
Mm.
Um, there's no Wasteland. There's land destruction like Stone Rain, but there's no Wasteland. There's no
Sure.
Chalice of the Void.
Anyway, so
So
the
you have,
point though is that ultimately it's a very it's a but the look, I understand what you're trying to say that like a lot of the things that make legacy work do not exist in Pauper. Sure, of
Mhm,
course. But at the same time, Pauper is also a blisteringly powerful format. It's
mhm,
incredibly strong and the
mhm.
play patterns lead you toward very competitive direction. Like
Yes.
I have played more cutthroat games of Pauper than I have of like modern or standard. The people like I can play a casual modern game and it would be like, okay, yeah, I'm just doing some weird stuff with like Memnite or whatever. Playing a casual Pauper game is still going to get your face cut off, right? Like those are still some really brutal, like people. I think one of the big things is that people look at Pauper and like, oh, it's commons. How bad can it be? I'm like, bro, these things were like, imagine every good draft deck you've ever had, just like some of them can crunch in really, really hard. There's some
Yeah.
absurdly good. The fact that Pestilence is a goddamn common at one point.
I love that card. But yeah, and it's not just the greatest limited hits from all time. There are
Yeah.
some really interesting niche archetypes, like the familiars deck I was talking about before. Um, one of the big decks is now a green red ramp deck that uses the Cascade creatures from Commander Legends,
Oh,
Annoyed
geez.
Altasaur and Boarding Party, which are these huge chonker monsters. But to bridge the gap from Arbor Elf Utopia Sprawl to these, it runs everyone's favorite cards. Thermokarst, 1 green destroy target land, and if it was snow covered, you gain a life. And 1 Vuli Acid Moss,
Oh
two
god,
green
I love
green,
Monvuli Acid Moss.
2 green destroy target land, search your library for a forest card. Not a basic forest. So now it can get the dual lands.
Oh god damn it. Oh my
Yeah,
god, I didn't
it's
even really
so yeah.
like that means you can run like Nature's Lore or any of those random cards that say get target forest, and you're like, what if I got a forest that was also a mountain?
I played for a while. I played a black green version of this deck. Funny, right? Um, but I love being able to be like, well, I'm just gonna get my one, whatever the black green duel from Call Time was. I can't remember the name.
Dude, I don't know any of the names of those ones. I'm like the snow covered bayou is what that is. um
Yeah, I got more Haunted Myers, which is the one from Dominaria United, honestly. Um, but the format is this really interesting place where so much of it takes place on Magic Online. And I need to take a moment to shout out some of the communities around the world that really do a fantastic job with supporting Pauper. Uh, Huge props to Italy. They have an amazing Pauper scene. A few months ago, they had a 600-person Pauper tournament.
I know that thing's like a GP size. Like what?
The next one is going to be bigger. They do this 3 times a year. There's a group of people in the United Kingdom. I want to say specifically England, that is working towards that as well, trying to get their own Pauper series started. Brazil has a massive Pauper community, and they are some of the most dedicated people to the format I've ever spoken to, and really love it. Um, there's a very vibrant Japanese scene, but that is much more store based, as I understand it. But
Yeah.
they do a lot of work over there. And then, there are people in pockets around the United States that are trying to get it off the ground. And the infrastructure, it's not quite where it is in Italy yet, because nothing's like where it is in Italy, but
Dude, every random
people want
Magic
that here.
format has just a bigger scene in Italy than you possibly could imagine. It's like
Oh,
there are
and
more Italian Magic players than people really realize, I think.
I think, I have not visited Italy in a number of years, but the fact that it has that rail system, which is pretty darn good, makes things a lot easier than, if I wanted to go to Buffalo, New York, which is in the same state I am in, it is either an 8-hour drive or I fly. There's no rail system that goes there super easily. Now, if I wanted to go to Boston, I could. Yeah,
Buffalo's really
Buffalo.
8 hours?
It is an 8-hour drive from New York City. Yeah, I know this because that's where I went to grad school.
Damn, that's like going from here to LA, but New York is not nearly as long as California.
Um,
You guys probably
so
just
there's
have
this
worse.
horrible thing about leaving New York City called traffic. Um,
Right, you have cars there. Yeah, okay.
yeah, no.
Um,
Like if you have to drive out of New York City at any time during rush hour, it automatically adds at least an hour to 2 hours to your trip. Like
fair.
if you drove straight shot to Buffalo, you could probably do it in about 6.5 hours
Yeah.
or 7.
In any
I
case,
I can't. Yeah.
yeah, but the point though is that like there's just Pauper is a very vibrant thing, and I know the Prof has done immeasurable work in making Pauper like
Yes.
into a global kind of like thing that people care about because it's like his favorite way to play Magic.
He loves it, and he's a great. Don't love this term, but I can't think of a better one right now. But he's a great evangelist for the format.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
really cares deeply about it. Really cares deeply about people being able to access magic. I've had the pleasure of working with him on a number of scripts back in the day.
Yeah,
Got to meet him at a Magic Fest a couple of years ago. Really, just someone who when he cares about something and believes in it, he will go to the ends of the earth to make sure you believe in it too. And I think that's a
yeah,
very good thing.
absolutely. And it's like it's so important, especially for fan run formats like Pauper or like other ones that he's like gone out of to the bat for. It's like it's just it's because Pauper is such an easy format to get into, and it's got so much depth and so much intricacy once you get past the surface. But even at the same time, you can still just make a scrub, like very synergistic draft commons deck and have it be fine and fun to play.
Yeah.
I wish that there was more emphasis on casual Pauper. Like, because one of the things is, and I'll let you talk in a second. One of the things is that competitive formats or formats that have very high, like tiers of competition, not necessarily for prizes, but just people are cutthroating. To get to that tier, you need to have that bottom tier of people who are
Mhm.
willing to like climb up the ladder to get there in order to feed you more players to fight against. And having just like more of a casual, low tier, low end, like let's play relaxed Pauper gives you people that will feed in and build into the bigger
Mhm.
community.
I think that's definitely been a struggle. I think part of it is because it is so accessible. You know,
Mm,
there's a very easy for years there's been a very easy on ramp. And I think that the focus back on tabletop play, which is where I think Popper's next growth area is, will allow for that. I think the proliferation of like Pauper EDH,
mm.
uncommon creature as your commander, everything else is common. And not I know there's a very vibrant CPDH or Pauper competitive
Yeah,
commander
God,
scene.
we're getting too many letters here, but yes, there's a competitive
Alphabet
Pauper
soup.
EDH is becoming a thing.
Yeah. And I'm talking about a separate format where it's literally just you pick an uncommon as your commander
Yes,
and you run commons. I think that is a great way to get people invested in um, Pauper at that base level.
and the
Unless you're
on
playing
ramp is
against me,
so low. It's commons, it's draft chaff,
I
it's
mean, unless you're playing against
everybody.
me where my Pauper commander is Shirei, because that was an uncommon at one point, and that's not very nice.
Yeah,
Um,
dude.
yeah.
Look, my Pauper Elves deck runs beta Lana Wars, so it's just
Oh my god.
like I've got no place to talk. I was like, of course I'm gonna take my junk trash deck and just bling it out as much as I possibly can. It's like, yeah, why are all your lands black bordered? Hey, shut up, okay? Look, they had to go somewhere. They're all commons.
But I think that actually one of the things that hurt that style of Pauper the most was the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Because up to that point, Grand Prix, at least in the United States, were having Pauper side events that were 3 rounds long, and you could run into people playing the most top tier deck, and then the Alara Blades deck, which was just multicolor cards. And I think Pauper was really on an upswing, and then just like so many things, COVID shut down, and Pauper went back to Magic Online, which isn't a bad thing, but it kind of
But it means
lost
that
all that
the
momentum.
but Magic Online also has this condensing ability of making the it narrows the amount of decks that are available. The cream rises to the top. Everybody wants to be at the top, so they start just
Mhm.
following the meta, and it just ends up being this compounding factor where everybody's just playing incredibly brutal decks at the end of the day. Because you can't run a Maverick deck in a mid go like league and expect to get anywhere at all, right? Like, but in any case, uh, Pauper is just great. I really enjoy the format. I enjoy watching it a lot. I enjoy playing it a lot. I don't get to as much as I used to because obviously there's a lot less in-person
Yeah.
play. But I look at it fondly because like when I'm not playing against a stupid friggin' bounty decks, I get to have a good time.
I Yeah, and I think that Arena actually has done a lot because they run their Pauper events every so
Oh
often.
yeah, those are super fun.
Um, and there still is a vibrant community on Magic Online of people who are running player run events. These things where there's no entry, they're just kind of organizing a tournament with, a note card and pen and paper. And it's a much more casual vibe. And I don't play those anymore. I That's not where my heart lies with the format, but it's absolute. I think the biggest one is still on Tuesdays. I think it's called Pauper Classic Tuesdays, and they still run a really vibrant online tournament scene, and that's awesome that it's still going on almost 17 years later
Yeah, I
after I
know, isn't it
started.
rad? I don't know, I love that. I
So
love the idea of I'm a big supporter of any player run format, and I
yeah,
think that when Gavin decided to reach out and make you guys the panel, I think it was a brilliant idea because the WotC can only do so much. They've got bigger fish to fry, and they're like, "Look, if there are
yes.
enough of you guys playing this, we might as well allow you to have some say in the format." And I think it's been great. But my friend, this has been a wonderful chat. I love talking to you. It was super fun. Like it felt like we met for the first time at Philly, but we've known each other for so long that it didn't feel like that at all. You know, it was just
You
very
yelled at me
comfortable.
because I wasn't going to give you a hug right away.
I was like, "Who the hell are you, man? We've known each other for a decade. What do you think you're doing?" Um, I'm like, I don't view any separation between my online and offline friends. Like we've known each other for long enough now that that is kind of just not the issue anymore. But if folks wanted to find you or yell at you about not banning mnemonic wall, where could they go?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is I'm at Nerd to the Core on Twitter. I also have a blog, nerdtothecore.com, where you can find links to most of my articles and everything. Linktree.com/slash nerd to the core has absolutely everything. It's the best way to find me. But I'm on Twitter less these days just because I find that the website breaks every so often. Um, but you can always find me. I'm always happy to talk about the format, and hopefully, we'll continue to grow and thrive, and I'll have other stuff to talk about, in the future. Because I
Turns
write
out they're
articles
always
at
making
least every
commons,
week.
man.
So many. I'm so happy Aftermath had no comments. It was a
I
set I could take
was gonna say,
off.
I'm
It
like,
was
so
great.
aftermath must have been like a breath of fresh air for you guys. You're like, hey, guess what? There's nothing. You get
Nothing. Zero.
nothing.
Zilch. It was
Anyways, my
great.
friends, as always, you can find me at Gear Pretty Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube also on Tuesdays. Thank you to my editor, EK. You can also find me on my other podcast, Shivam and Wheeler Love Magic, which I really ought to be just advertising more. I should have Wheeler come back sometime. But remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.